Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. This post is from the subreddit Relationships and it's by user Deleted. Non-romantic. My 29 female wife, 28 female, and I work together and we're anticipating becoming business partners with our boss, 40 male. I just got into a seriously bizarre confrontation with his wife, 40 female, and now we need some help navigating this. Hi all, so I'll preface this by saying I'm normally an uber lurker. I like popping onto Reddit here and there, throwing a few upvotes around, and generally being entertained by the great posts in this subreddit. So my wife and I are in the restaurant industry. She's an incredibly talented chef, and she is the executive chef at the gastropub we both work at, while I'm the de facto lead cocktail waitress and server. My wife has opened a few restaurants in our city and other cities prior to this one and has a good amount of press and professional interest. Her brand as a chef is really starting to take off, but it in no way is entirely or even mostly because of her current position. I've also been in the restaurant industry in the city and other cities, serving and bartending for years. We're a restaurant lifer couple. We were the first employees of this restaurant, the only full-time employees, and we opened it with the owners along with a handful of part-time servers, bartenders, and line and prep cooks. It's a small, upscale gastropub in a really vibrant neighborhood in a large coastal city. We have great guests and even better reviews, and as I mentioned above, my wife is getting more and more press and interest. When the two of us were hired, professional interest in my wife was part of the reason why the owners offered us a chance to eventually buy in or become co-owners to the gastropub and any future restaurants they owned. This was, we decided, a great opportunity for both of us. For the first few months we opened in early spring, things have been wonderful. Happy guests, the aforementioned great reviews, my wife has almost total autonomy in the kitchen. It has been an incredible work experience that made us really confident in using a huge amount of money to become partners. Now, 3 weeks ago, we unfurled a brunch program to accompany our dinner and cocktail program, with the intention that I would run the floor for service along with our owner's wife, who has been a stay-at-home mom for a year or so after a couple of decades of restaurant industry work. The first weekend, his wife and I worked together fairly well together. I think we both anticipated some growing pains with communication, like a normal new co-worker, but nothing negative materialized until the second weekend. His wife seemed to have a hard time relinquishing control over every single guest and table that we had, and as a result, she began interfering with my guests and tables instead of focusing on her own. In frustration, I lashed out in a really petty and mildly rude way. I snapped and asked if she just wanted me to transfer her my table since she clearly wanted to take them all. She asked if she was stepping on any toes, and I told her I would appreciate being able to connect with my own guests and tables, and I felt she was interfering. She said she understood, and for the rest of the shift, in my view, we went back to being cordial and professional and had no further confrontations. When the shift was over, I headed home without any serious further thought. Then, when my wife came home, she had been in the restaurant kitchen when the altercation took place. She told me that both the owner and his wife sat her down and read her the riot act of my apparent behavior problems or work performance issues, and that because they didn't want to upset my wife, they wanted her to talk to me about my apparent issues. My wife told them to keep her completely out of it, and any work-related issues they had with me needed to be addressed to me, as was appropriate. I should mention that prior to hearing this from my wife, virtually no work-related problems have been brought to my attention. I am generally a reliable, well-liked employee with a pretty solid amount of glowing guest reviews. I decided to head up early the next morning and discuss this one-to-one with the owner's wife. I figured this was a pretty big miscommunication with some weird missteps on both parts, and I wanted to have a calm and reasonable face-to-face discussion. I figured maybe the two of us just weren't quite communicating well and we could figure out a way to work better and ultimately be in business together. That would benefit both of us. So I met with her before work, with the anticipation also of apologizing for being totally petty with my comment the weekend before. Reddit, this was the most absurd and pointless conversation I have ever had in my adult professional life. I opened the conversation by explaining that I was upset and was trying to be diplomatic, but was having a hard time navigating our situation, and I felt it was inappropriate for her and her husband to discuss issues of mine with my wife. That was the longest sentence I managed to get out before her index finger went up and the voice started raising. I was told I was rude, had bad vibes around customers, and had a bad attitude towards her and, by extension, our guests and our restaurant. I was informed repeatedly that she was from New York, and she just always talked like this. She didn't know what I wanted or needed out of trying to have a conversation with her, etc. It was pretty heavily implied that I'm her subordinate, which I suppose technically I am, and always will be. It was pretty condescending and defeatist. She ended up abruptly walking out of the conversation, and I ended up crying in public, which was mortifying. Then she walked up to my wife, who was back in the restaurant kitchen, apologizing to her for all the drama, and asked my wife how old I was. I'll say this for my wife, she's not an enabler. She's supportive, but if she thinks I'm being unreasonable or over the top or generally seeing a situation in an inaccurate way, she won't hesitate to tell me. We were both really appalled with how this has been handled, and we've both decided, after days of thinking, that it's pretty clear we aren't willing to go into business with this couple. We have some really fundamentally different ways of communicating and dealing with guests and service, and my wife and I aren't willing to deal with their communication style. We've decided to move on in December, probably head back to Vegas, also known as the Mecca of food, where we lived prior to this city. However, the owner, not his wife, sent me a text saying the two of us, the owner and me, needed to have a discussion about the situation. He's already assured my wife I'm a good server and not getting fired. Cue eye roll. At this point, I'm really not sure how to proceed or what to talk to him about, or if I should agree to meet at all. At this point, my wife and I are just removing ourselves mentally from the business, treating it like any other job and moving on in 4 months. Neither of us is willing to stay, and we're both confident and happy with our decision. If anyone is still here after that mountain of text, my question is, how do I or we navigate this situation? What do I say in my meeting with the owner? I'm a fairly clever and aloof person, so I have no problem either playing dumb, being a yes man, or vehemently defending myself. Although, I'm leaning towards the former because I'm already emotionally and mentally moved on. What's the best way to handle this? Well, OP, in my opinion, since you've already emotionally and mentally moved on, I mean, the both of you, you and your wife, of course, and you're just waiting for 4 months to leave and go back to Vegas and do what you want to do over there, then I'd say just go to the meeting so that the environment doesn't get even more tense and just hear what he has to say. Just agree with the things that you find agreeable and now put a stop to the ones that are ridiculous, and then just move on from that conversation. Continue to work those 4 months while you prepare your future. That's it. I also have no idea what he wants to talk to you about. I don't know if he wants to apologize, hang his wife out to dry or back up his wife. We don't know that, but it really doesn't matter since you guys have already moved on. So I would say for the sake of your and your wife's mental health and, for just general well-being, treat it as a peace talk and then just move on. And what do you guys think about this whole thing? What would you do if you were in OP's shoes? Let me know in the comment section. And now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. And Dave says, meet with him and see what he has to say. He is the boss and you plan to continue working there. He might know his wife is crazy and offer you an olive branch, or maybe he'll confirm that his wife is your superior and you need to check the attitude. And Opie responds, all good points, thanks for your response. I think if he confirms she is my superior, that would reiterate we're doing the right thing moving on. He likely thinks we're still on board to give him tens of thousands of dollars to buy part of his business. Kind of a win-win, lose-lose situation. Teresa JS says, explain the problem you had in detail with his wife during the brunch service. Tell him that you understand that she is his wife, but that the way she later spoke to you was unprofessional. Ask the owner if she has any problems with your service. Also, ask how he wants the brunch service handled going forward. And Opie responds, I guess I'm a bit worried of his reaction too, since I assumed I could have a reasonably calm conversation with her and didn't. I don't want to assume he'll be any more calm and reasonable, if that makes sense. Thanks for reading. Damn Purple Dress says, do you need this job as a reference for when you relocate? If yes, then apologize to the owner for the miscommunication with his wife. Suggest that you don't seem to mesh well with you both working the floor. Different serving style, flow, you really like to build a professional rapport with your guests, but not overserve or interfere with them as they are enjoying their meal. But the owner's wife has a different approach and you respect that she can set the ambience for the diners and you will follow suit. You just were not used to another server interacting with your tables. But maybe also, could she have brunch and you dinner or vice versa? Flesh out the servers with part-timers and then make peace with the owner's wife? Most likely apologies and groveling. If you don't need the reference, then scorch the earth and save the owner from his wife. Her serving style is invasive and off-putting to guests as well as other servers. Her management style is invasive, unapproachable, and off-putting to employees, and discussing personnel issues with another employee, regardless of relationship, was unprofessional. I'm sure he could appreciate not wanting gossip or complaining regarding his wife circling around the floor. But if you do all that, they'll just find a reason to can your wife. You'll both lose out on a reference, but you'll be out of that hellhole where the owners will burn the reputation to the ground given the wife's service, and you can head back to Vegas even sooner. Win-win? And Opie responds, oh man, you guys are all killing it with this diplomatic advice. I really appreciate it. I think this is really spot on. I've already had a handful of complaints on the over-service she's doing, and after the confrontation, I'm really not willing to try and correct it. We're definitely just going to pack up and go in a few months. Neither of us needs the reference and honestly can erase it from our resumes with little consequence. I guess it's less how do we deal with this work issue and more this totally changes our future plans with this couple. How should I diplomatically address that, if that makes sense? Thanks. Alright, well the community definitely gave OP some diplomatic advices that she was really appreciating. And OP really isn't worried about the reference and they just want to move on. So let's do the same and move on to the update to see how this story ends. But of course before that, here's another one of my playlists for you to enjoy after this video. Now let's move on with that update. Hi y'all, I have to say, I really am blown away by the diplomacy and sympathy I received with my first post. I really thought this was a pretty mild topic that wouldn't receive too much attention, so I'm really grateful for everyone that took the time to comment. Seriously, once I hit 7 upvotes and 4 comments, I thought that would be the end of it. I also want to clarify and expand on a few details before I dive into the update situation. First, I have absolutely no ego about my job. I'm a freaking waitress. I'm completely aware it certainly doesn't take any specific skill to be competent at it, but experience does contribute. That said, I love my job. I served and bartended through 2 college degrees and kept on going afterward. I have a blast at work. But I'm also absolutely aware that my wife is a significantly more valuable employee, and were this a simple employee situation, I would happily just move to a new job. I also wanted to clarify the owner's wife's interference when I snapped at her. She wasn't simply checking on tables or refilling water glasses or pre-bussing tables. Pre-bussing is clearing empty plates from the table while diners are still seated. At one point, she was standing at one of my tables for about 3 to 4 minutes, which is a long-ass time in the restaurant world. Talking about her 4 kids and which one still breastfed, her mortgage, how much they would lose if the business failed, the application process my wife went through to become the head chef, and the owner's wife's own work history, etc. It was incredibly inappropriate and a really invasive service style. I usually don't even let my own guests know I'm married to the chef unless it organically comes up in conversation. Multiple tables were actively complaining to me about her service style, which led to the admittedly petty comment I made to her. Anyway, I went in to meet the owner. I asked our bar manager to be present at the meeting as well. The bar manager is a longtime friend of the owner and was present for the initial altercation and the private conversation the owner's wife and I had. So the 3 of us chatted for about 5 minutes. I said very little and mostly took the general advice here of deferring to whatever my boss said. I generally employed 3 key phrases. I understand, you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. The bar manager, with whom I primarily work rather than the owner, completely shut down any tense moments by immediately telling the owner that I was a self-assured, seasoned server who needed little to no direction, and that owner's wife's name overstepped her boundaries in a big way, which led to a pretty understandable reaction from me. The owner pretty much deflated after that. He hemmed and hawed a bit about me being inappropriate, to which I agreed, and then repeatedly told me his wife had no problem with me. I cheerfully answered, "Great, I look forward to working with her next shift," and that essentially ended the conversation. I did ask the owner point blank if his wife was considered my superior when we worked together. He looked confused and clarified that no, she was considered my complete equal both on the floor and off. He also firmly stuck to his guns and being justified in discussing my personal performance issues with my wife, a statement to which I again deferred. That was the planned end of my update until a pretty serious conversation with my wife last night. Prior to or aside from this altercation, there have been some instances that my wife witnessed that really made her decision if we should invest with them. Apparently, the owner has been getting hammered on his shifts. He works alone behind the bar a few days early in the week, whereas I work the later weekdays and the weekends. To the point where he has fallen over in front of guests behind the bar or completely unable to make cocktails. We're an upscale craft cocktail bar, visibly intoxicated and heavily slurring, generally giving terrible drunk service. The breaking point for my wife was 2 one-star Yelp reviews within minutes of each other, specifically calling out his service. One guest had to actually go to the kitchen window to get her own food. Reddit, it's terrible. I was completely appalled and upset for and with her. And we both agreed this is not the way we want to run a business and reiterated to each other that any potential partnership with this couple wasn't going to happen. We're both professionally serious people, both committed to her career goal and neither of us willing to do anything to jeopardize that. Anyway, so we're both on the same page. We're keeping our savings intact and completely mentally and emotionally checked out of going into business with this couple and generally getting all of our ducks in a row to head back to Vegas so she can get back into some of the top tier restaurants out there. Our lease is up in November, so we'll just ride it out until then. Reddit, I really appreciate the attention this query received. I really felt a bit unmoored with how to handle it, and I'm glad that you all essentially told me to follow my instincts and play it safe and close to the vest. That's it. Thanks, everyone. Wow, OP, you guys dodged a business bullet. Starting with the wife's ego, like she's your boss or whatever, and then this guy just getting drunk inside the restaurant. Yeah, that's not good for business. So good for you both making that decision, and here's wishing you the best in the future. Take care, OP, and thank you for sharing. Now, let's finish this video with a short mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliant, and it's by user TherandoMuser84. I know. Just having some fun with the name. Company doesn't allow me to have a phone, so I cost them 100,000 plus. I originally posted this as a comment to a similar story as I had totally forgotten it happened until I read that. The OP suggested I should share it as my own post, so here it goes. I have worked in a warehouse for years. A few years back I was a contractor. Companies would hire us and bring in 20 plus people for a few weeks when they desperately needed help. I was a shift lead, usually the highest person on site, and I needed to talk to my boss regularly throughout the day on a company phone. One warehouse had a policy where only managers could have their phones on the floor, and technically, I wasn't a manager. Everyone under me was instructed to leave them in their car or a locker. However, I needed mine. One day, I was talking on the phone to my boss, and one of the managers for the company we were working for saw me and demanded I hand him my phone, and I refused. He then threatened to kick me out, so I rounded up all my workers and said we were taking a break. We all go outside and I tell my boss what happened. He comes to the site instantly and starts talking to their boss and tells him I need my phone on the floor, but since I don't have a manager in my title, they refuse. So my boss decided I couldn't do my job, so nobody under me could do theirs either. At the end of the day, the other company is pissed we didn't get any work done and decides to cancel our contract, which cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's written in the contract that they would have to pay to send us home before the original end date. Well, Peep, he wanted to kick you out and then they canceled the contract. It's on them. Imagine losing that much money because of a policy. Idiots. Thanks for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.